Hey guys, Positive here, and today we're going to be talking about all the fun new unreleased premium tanks that are coming to Blitz. I feel like I'm probably a little late to the party. I think some other YouTubers might have already covered them, but who cares? I'll just give my opinion on them and let you know basically what I think about them. So unfortunately for me, I didn't get to test the T26E5. A little disappointed. However, while that's unfortunate for me, it's fortunate for you guys now that you get to hear me blab about my opinion before the tank is released, and I don't have to worry about getting permabanned. So that's cool. And without further ado, let's jump right into things. Starting off, in case you haven't noticed, the new garage, WG just dropped information on their new 5th anniversary event, and as part of it, they're releasing 3 new Defender tanks based on the Cromwell. And let's start with those. So let's start by talking about the easiest of the new anniversary tanks you get, and that would be the Y5 T34. So basically for all these new Defender tanks, they're basically just Cromwells with different turrets at different tiers. And actually, contrary to the Defender kind of name, there are no autoloaders on these tanks. So personally, when WG kind of announced these tanks on their official YouTube channel, I was kind of hoping for the new auto reloader mechanism, but unfortunately, getting none of the sort. They're all single shooters, just to clear that out of the way, which is really disappointing. But anyway, that aside, so the easiest one to get in the event is apparently going to be the Y5 T34. It's a tier 5, and it's the Cromwell with the T34 turret slapped on top. So compared to other tier 5s, it's actually pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. So I think the closest comparison is the Scavenger, but some of the tanks this comparison kind of make it look bad. But if you take like a more average sort of tier 5, like Panzer 4 Ausf G, it's just completely outclassed as you can see. But anyway, so like compared to the Scavenger, it's probably the best comparison because these two tanks are so similar. If you use the 75 on the Scavenger, the Scourge gun or whatever, so it's got pretty good DPM. 1400 is better than pretty much all the mediums, other than like the 57mm armed T34s and the Scavenger, as you can see here. It also beats out like the M4 Sherman, as you can see, by a little bit. Penetration is 110. That's fairly standard for tier 5, although it's lower than like the ELC and like the Americans, but it's higher than again like Panzer 4G. Just kidding, it's the same. Anyway, it's pretty average pen. But besides that, pretty mediocre accuracy. It's more accurate than Sherman, but less accurate than Scavenger. Although it does get 10 degrees of gun depression, which is going to be quite nice when you want to play around with this tank, because as far as I know, it gets 10 degrees of gun depression all around the whole of the tank, except for like right over the back. It looks like it only gets 4 degrees. But really, like 10 degrees gun depression, nice gun. And then also like you've got 50km/h speed limit. That makes it one of the faster tanks in tier 5, along with this very healthy, effective horsepower to ton ratio, beating out the Scavenger, the Sherman, and the M10 Wolverine, but obviously not fast enough to compare with the ELC, for instance. Anyway, that's pretty much it. As far as armor goes, it's the Cromwell hull. Everything in tier 5 is going to pen you. Although I will say the turret's actually not that bad. Like on the turret face, you have like 130 to like 120 millimeters of armor, so only the cheats can really be penned by other tier 5s and even some tier 6s. But yeah, overall pretty solid tank. It's worth picking up. But it's tier 5, who cares? Let's move on to the next one. Moving on to the next most difficult tank to obtain, we are at the tier 6 Y5 Firefly, which is Cromwell hull with the Firefly turret slapped on top. And so basically I'm comparing it to the Cromwell and the EZ8, which I think are pretty much the closest relatives. So right away we can see it's like pretty mediocre pen, 130. That's not ideal. It's only 2mm better than Sherman, which has one of the worst pens in tier 6. And it can't compete with the 145 on Cromwell Berlin. Very nice shell velocity, I guess, but whatever. I don't care about shell velocity. Moving on, as far as accuracy goes, it's in between and the Sherman and the Cromwell B, kind of like the pen is. So it's got nice aim time, but it's also got nice dispersion, and also it's got nice gun handling. So actually it's generally more accurate than both the tanks in this comparison. And then you've still got 10 degrees gun depression. However, that can't really compete with 13 on the Cromwell Berlin and 12 on the Sherman. So, but that's just because like these two tanks have amazing gun compression. 10 degrees is still very nice. Mobility is also between the Sherman and the Cromwell Berlin, so it's faster than the Sherman for sure, but it can't really compete with the Cromwell Berlin's excellent mobility. So really, all in all, and then as far as armor goes, it's not really different from the Cromwell Berlin. It's actually got less armor, I think, than the Tier 5 version, because like the turret's bigger and easier to pen. And we're still shooting at it with the same gun. As you can see, it's actually worse armor than the Tier 5, oddly enough. But overall, it's basically like a budget Cromwell Berlin, I think. Like, you do gain this little bit of accuracy, but you trade away this gun depression, this mobility, and this penetration that the Cromwell Berlin gets. So, it's going to be a decent tank, nothing special. Probably a little worse for the tier than the Tier 5 is. Also, it's kind of low tier, so I don't really care too much. Moving on, next one is Tier 7. And now here we are at the Tier 7. This is the last and final tank in like this event progression. Theoretically, it's the hardest, although we'll have to see how hard it actually is to get once more details on the event come out. But anyway, I'm going to compare against the Comet and the T-23E3, both very similar tanks. And well, it's kind of disappointing, to be honest. Like, it's got less DPM than the Comet and the T-23E3. You can see it's also got less pen. It's got good aim time, just like the other tanks in the line. This version is pretty decent as well. It's the same as the T-23E3, but less than the Comet. Very nice gun handling though. .12/.12 is excellent for Tier 7. However, breaking tradition with the other ones, like the other Y5 tanks, only has 7 degrees gun depression. That's really disappointing compared to Comet and T-23E3, which have 12 and 10 respectively. As far as mobility goes, it's a fairly fast tank, but it's not really that much faster than the Comet or the T-23E3. So it's not like a Cromwell. So if we just add the Cromwell Berlin back to this comparison, it's still not really rocketing around like a Cromwell. It's still very standard medium tank mobility, maybe just a touch faster, but it's nothing really groundbreaking. And like going over the armor, once again, it's still the Cromwell hull, and it's an ELC turret, although I think it's got a little more mantlet armor, but 134 millimeters is not going to stop anything at Tier 7. And let me remind you, we're still shooting at this with the Tier 5 guns, so it won't be bouncing anything, just like the Tier 6. So it's definitely got less armor than like the Comet per se, which could actually bounce a couple of shells with the mantlet. And really, especially in today's Tier 7, when you got like Smasher and like Lupus and all these other broken tanks. Well, thank God this tank is not broken, but this tank really just can't compete. Like Comet and T-23E3 are just strictly better than this thing. And like Comet and T-23E3 aren't even very good tanks anymore. Like T-23E3 is actually pretty bad, and then the Comet's not even that good either. And the fact that this new Tier 7 is somehow worse than these is, well, it's kind of disappointing if you're looking for some OP tank to carry on the Defender name, but you won't find it here. Especially considering you'll get that 7 degrees gun depression. It's just, even like the Panther gets 8. And I don't think you can justify that when you only have 160 alpha. The DPM is still good, but again, worse than Comet T-23E3. So I guess I'm glad that it's not a pay-to-win tank like freaking other tanks looking at you, Smasher, with your OP DPM. But anyway, that about does it for like these kind of new Y5 tanks. I mean, they'll be nice to pick up for free, but I don't think I'd recommend spending money to get any of them, unless you really love the Defender aesthetic, because I feel like that's WG's target audience here is really just little kids who love the electric motor looking thing in the back. But now let's move on to some more fun premium tanks at Tier 8. Finally, a relevant tier. So the new Tier 8 premiums, let's start by talking about the VK168.01P. So I think WG released some pictures of it on Facebook a while back, but in case you don't know what it looks like, well, it looks like a mouse, except they put the turret on backwards. Real creative, but you know what, it's okay. Although the funny thing is, even though it looks like the turret is backwards, if you spin the turret all the way around, it still looks backwards. It just looks backwards no matter what you do. But besides the funny looks of the tank, statistically, it's balanced, I guess? I mean, there's no other tanks to compare it to really other than the VK 100.01P. They're extremely similar. So you got basically this, actually pretty much the same gun. You got the 12.8 centimeter L50. So 460 alpha, 220 pen, same DPM, which is fairly low for the tier, but you know, it could be worse. However, the VK168 gets faster aim time, but much worse gun handling. It remains to be seen how much of a difference that actually makes, but I assume more or less roughly the same overall accuracy sort of feel. And then it's also marginally slower, by like half a horsepower per ton. But I mean, the real problem is always going to be that 20 kilometer per hour speed limit. You won't be going anywhere fast with this tank. So the real question is, how does the armor stack up? As a German super heavy, you expect nothing but the best armor, and at first glance, it's not that bad. Like, upper plate is not going to get penned. And then as for like the turret, 233 millimeters versus AP on the cheeks, but if they load the gold, then pretty much most tiers will have no problem going through if you don't angle your turret. So you can actually angle your turret, and then you can get your effective armor up to like 280, 270 millimeters of armor. If we compare that to the VK 100.01P, yeah, like the VK 100, there's not much the VK 100 can do to not get penned in the turret by the IS-3's gold shell. But this VK 168.01P, you can actually get some pretty solid armor thickness. Like 284 is gonna 270 to 280. This is gonna bounce pretty much everything that's not a tier 8 TD loading gold or like a tier 9 loading gold. So against tier 7s, they're not even gonna contest it, other than maybe this random weak spot which no one will hit. However, of course, the problem is other weak spots. Oh, not HE. Like the lower plate, there's nothing you can do about this lower plate. Even if you like seriously angle it up, it's what is that, 200 millimeters at this massive angle. Yeah, if they see this thing, they're always gonna pen it. Like you can't even like go sort of like hull up. Like sometimes I like to go hull up by advancing up slow. You can't even do that. It's still gonna get penned. And then the other big problem is this cupola. This cupola is much bigger than the VK100's cupola. And this, I envision, is going to be something of a problem because it's actually big. Unlike the VK100, so like if you look at the VK100's cupola, like it's a little bit smaller and a little bit fatter. However, actually now that I look at it, I guess they're fairly similar in size, but I really think this is going to be a problem when you're trying to play this tank. And the other weak spot is going to be this machine gun port. I don't envision this being too much of a problem, but what this does mean is you can't face hug in this tank. You can't face hug your way to victory like you might be able to in other super heavies, because if you face hug someone like this, they're just going to shoot this all day long. And this, no matter what you do in a face hug, this is going to be a problem. Because otherwise, if it didn't have this weak spot, this thing would be incredibly effective in a face hug. This would be possibly better than a 252U in a face hug, because 252U you can shoot in the cupola, but if you're playing like an IS tank or something against this in a face hug, you're never going to hit this cupola. That's just not going to happen, especially if he's trying to gun block you. But anyway, that's just a fantasy because this weak spot does indeed exist. So you can still face hug, just be aware that this will be an issue for you. As far as the side armor goes, it's pretty decent, I guess, but it's not as strong as the VK100. So against IS-3 APCR, this is the furthest that you can angle the tank. And it's about 240 millimeters, but once they load the gold, it's a problem. Meaning that you have to do this, I guess, to make it even more effective. And this is just an auto ricochet, which kind of defeats the point, because any tank will bounce when you put it at an auto ricochet. This is contrasted against the VK100, which actually has better side armor. So you can see that the VK100 doesn't start to become vulnerable until this angle. However, switching back to the VK168, you can see 217 millimeters. It's going to pen because it's completely flat. But anyway, that about does it for the VK168. If you like the VK100, you'll probably like the VK168. It's very similar. You kind of just drive really slowly and hope to dear God that they miss your weak spots. And then you hit people in the face for 460. I don't really know if I'd recommend buying it. Like, it's not going to be like a pay-to-win tank, thank God. We'll have to see how much it costs. But if you really love the super heavies playstyle and you want to make credits with it, then VK168 is your man. Otherwise, I think VK100 is very similar. Although I can't really decide which one's better than the other, because like on the one hand, the VK168 has a better turret. On the other hand, VK100 has a better hull. Alright, moving on to the next tier 8 premium now. And here's our next tier 8 premium that WG should be releasing sometime soon. You might have already seen some on the battlefield. It is the T26E5, better known on PC as the Patriot. So it's being tested right now. These stats are very much subject to change. In fact, I'm yet to see, there's only been a couple tanks that have made it through testing without having their stats changed. So this may or may not be pointless, but who cares? I'm going to review it anyway because you need to hear my opinion. Actually, you make that decision. Anyway, here's my opinion. So, I'll let the stats speak for themselves. The very first stat that does the talking is the DPM. 2,514 DPM is massive. This is more DPM than any tier 8 medium. Like the CDC, the Panther 88, none of those tanks have anything on 2,514 DPM. And then, compared to heavies, it's also no contest. I think the only thing that really has more DPM is the Carnarvon here in this comparison. But unlike the Carnarvon, you have this healthy 240 alpha. So this is the only 90mm gun in Blitz, other than the Black Dog, which gets 240 alpha, which does make it quite nice. However, it doesn't get that 310 HE alpha that the Black Dog gets. It only gets the standard 270, which is the same as like the Super Pershing. But 240 is still very nice. Accuracy-wise, this tank is still very nice. That snappy 1.72 second aim time, excellent dispersion, 0.308, pretty much kicking the pants off the other Americans in this comparison, only losing out to the Carnarvon with that tiny gun. And then I will say that the gun handling is fairly mediocre, but it's about on par with the T-32, it's very similar. And then you get the classic 10 degrees American gun depression, and pretty decent mobility, about on par with the T-32. Armor profile wise, it's very similar armor profile to the T-32. So the upper hull is about 200mm effective versus AP, and they're never going to pen the turret. It's like the T-32. Not going to happen. Unless they get really lucky with some random RNG and they hit this kind of cheek, this kind of roof stripe, but these things are tiny. Even the cupola, it's very troll, 274, 290. Only a stripe in the middle is going to bounce shells. Also, I should note that the lower plate has this really weird shape, which means that you angle the tank against something with lower pen. So, for example, a tier 8 medium. Then, yeah, the lower plate will actually bounce shells. If you come around a corner like this, and they're aiming for the lower plate, there's a decent chance they'll bounce, which is a little interesting. As for what I think of this tank, well, to be honest, I think it's kind of dumb because it obsoletes the T26E4 and the Chieftain T95 and the T32 all at once. Because objectively, the T26E5 is just flat out better than these tanks. The only thing it sacrifices compared to the T32 is this alpha damage. Because T26E5 has this better pen as well, better DPM, better accuracy, about the same mobility, about the same armor profile. Compared to the T26E4, it's even worse for the T26, which has already been relevant for a long time. You've got essentially just a flat out better gun. T26E4 is a garbage gun. So the T26E5, the Patriot, which I'll just call it now to prevent it from being confusing. The Patriot just has actual accuracy, actual DPM, actual penetration, more alpha damage, the same mobility, and actual armor. The T26E4 is going to get penned in the turret roof all the time, in the cupola. People are going to shoot in the lower plate. T26E5 is having none of that nonsense. You're not penning this thing in the turret. Not going to happen. And the sides are also a little bit better, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so scrolling down, the sides are actually the same. Psych. Chieftain T95 is the same story. Chieftain T95 is another 90mm armed heavy. Once again, less DPM, much less penetration, less alpha damage, about the same accuracy, although cheap T95 is marginally better gun handling. And it's only marginally faster, but again, it doesn't have this cupola on top that the cheap T95 has. I don't know if I'd call it OP at the moment because it's still fairly low mobility and fairly low alpha. However, it is very strong, and I will be very disappointed with wargaming if it gets released with these stats. On PC, it's fairly similar. Quickie Baby pretty much just rags on this tank for being pretty much the icon of overpowered premium until, gosh, even more overpowered premiums come along. But even so, it's still a very iconic, quote-unquote, overpowered premium tank. If it comes to the shop, it's probably worth it, assuming it's not in crates. Pro tip, it's never worth it if it's in crates. I don't care how good it is, just don't do it. Don't buy crates. But it is a very strong tank, and it just adds to this pattern of WG releasing these overpowered tanks from PC, and they're just still overpowered when they come to Blitz. Tanks like 252U, like Weezin 120G FT, the Lorraine 40T, which is arguably overpowered. I think it is. Scorpion, which is arguably not that overpowered, but whatever. All these tanks from PC that are kind of overpowered are coming to Blitz, and it's not cool. Not cool, WG. I expect this thing at least needs a DPM nerf. If they just nerf the DPM down to like 2200, bam, I think it's balanced. That'll be sort of competitive with the likes of T32. Also, one thing I should mention is according to Tank Compare and Blitz Hanging or something, it has a very curious ammo situation. And by that I mean the premium shell does the same damage as the normal shell, but it only has 5mm more penetration. So I'm not sure if it's going to be released like this or what's going on with this sort of funky ammo setup. But I should note that T2065 doesn't actually have like a high pen premium shell. Although compared to the T32, it's only 10mm less on its gold round. So make of that what you will. That's my general opinion on the T26E5. I don't know if I'm a fan of this coming to Blitz as it stands. Although hopefully our testers will inflate the stats massively and WG will come to their senses and nerf it like they did with the Badger compared to the release version. And that about does it for the T26E5. And I think there's just one more new tank to cover. We're going back to Tier 6. And the last tank I'm going to mention is Tiger 131, which is also apparently coming. It's a Kuro. Yeah, that's it. It's a Kuro. It's marginally slower. It has marginally less hull armor. Other than that, it's a Kuro. So if you play the Kuro and you want like a non-anime version, Tiger 131 is the tank for you. As for what I think of it, well, I didn't really like Kuro to start with. I think it's kind of bad actually, because the armor is not really brilliant. The gun kind of sucks. And it's just very overall kind of bad. And now that M6 has been buffed, why would you not play the M6, which is just massively better? The M6 has more side armor, more front armor, 10 degrees gun depression, like more alpha damage marginally. I don't know, overall M6 is just a better tank. You should play the M6, like massively more mobility. I kind of hope that Tiger 131 will be available through some sort of free event, but it'll probably be sold, knowing WG. But overall, balanced tank. And then the other new premium tank that is also coming is the M4 FL10. However, I have heard rumors that it is an auto reloader, which means that none of these gun stats really matter that much, because we have no idea how auto reloaders are going to work in Blitz. So I'm not really going to cover it, because, I mean, as far as the stats I can cover, they're not special. It's basically the STRV, like Steve from Tier 6, like same turret, M4 chassis. I don't know, it's not special. The one thing that is special is this auto reloader, and I don't know anything about it. So I want to cover it, but I can't. Other than that, those are basically my opinions on this new batch of premium tanks. Overall, other than the T2065, props to Wargaming. Actually balanced premiums for once. Like all these new Defender tanks, they're actually balanced. None of them are overpowered. VK168.01. It's pretty much just on par with the VK100. The Tiger 131 is basically just a Kuro, slightly weaker though. So I don't know. Balanced premiums, I like it, WG. And then there's T26E5, which at the moment is probably overpowered. However, as when it comes to test tanks, I feel like the whole point of WG's kind of Unicum tester program, it's more for publicity more than actual balancing decisions, because they only give test tanks to super Unicums. And the funny thing is, WG doesn't even balance tanks based on super Unicums. WG balances tanks based on 55 to 65% players, so like slightly lower than super Unicums. So you'd think that WG would not give balance purposes to super Unicums. It makes no sense. And the only thing I can really reason out is that they give it to super Unicums and they make them OP so that when average Joe 48%er goes up against super Unicum in an overpowered test tank, he's like, oh my god, it's overpowered. I need to buy it when it comes out right now. Give it to me. So I fully expect T26E5 will be nerfed, just like the Badger was nerfed compared to the test version. Yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a wonderful day, and bye.